This podcast is brought to you by Infinite Resources, a local staffing agency connecting diverse job candidates in central Iowa companies.
Amplified.
Welcome, everybody, to the Amner Martinez podcast. And on this episode, as you all know, Frank County, the mayor of Des Moines, Iowa, is not running anymore. So there's three candidates: Josh Mandelbaum, Connie Bozen, and Denver Foote. And one of them, Josh Mandelbaum, made some time for us and come to speak with us here at the Amner Martinez podcast. So just for transparency, this is not an endorsement of Josh Mandelbaum. I am a voter, so I'll make my choice when I'm in the ballot booth. But we thought it was important to speak with the candidates. So we did invite Connie Bozen and Denver Foote, and we haven't heard from them yet. But if we do, we'll make it happen. So we talked about his stance in transportation, housing, marijuana. What are the priorities, his priorities? What is the issues at hand for him, and why he's running and all that jazz. So enough of me. This is a very important episode. He is somebody that you would have to decide whether you want to vote for him or not. So thank you to Josh Mandelbaum for making time for us, or Councilman Josh Mandelbaum, for making time for us and sitting down with us and answering our questions. Also, thank you to Chris Noth, our co-host. We had several questions for him, and I think we did a pretty good job. So, but you be the judge of that, and also see if Josh is somebody that you're gonna vote for or not vote for. So, thank you for listening. Please share, comment. Don't be mean if you comment. Comment with positive or constructive feedback. But anyways, hope you listen to this one, share it, pass it on, and we'll see you on the next time. Well, thank you for joining us, Josh Mandelbaum.
Yeah, great to be here.
Yes, so we're here with Chris Noth, and as I was saying, we built a platform that it lends itself for us to have an opportunity to have conversations with people like yourself. You're current city council.
Yep.
And you're going to run for mayor.
Yeah.
So
in the middle of it.
In the middle of it. So we have a timer. We have the audience. We have the judges. So we'll give you 30 seconds. 30 seconds per answer. No. So tell us about you. Tell us, people that don't know who you are, potential voters. Tell us who you are and why you're running.
Yeah. So I'm Josh Mandelbaum.
Uh-huh.
I grew up here in Des Moines and have a lot of family history here in Des Moines. Both sides of my family, both my parents grew up here. My wife and I are raising our two kids here. And they're going to some of the same schools that I went to and that shaped me. And then I come at this with a policy, a public service background. So in my career, I've worked in public service. My first job out of college was at the Department of Transportation, U.S. Department of Transportation, in the Secretary's Policy Office. And it was a one-year fellowship. I was actually there during 9/11, which completely shaped the way that fellowship turned out and the things that we focused on. And then I came back to Iowa and I worked in the Vilsack-Peterson administration. I was on their policy staff for 4 years. And when they weren't running for re-election, I went back to law school at the University of Iowa. And I was in private practice for a few years. And for the last 11 years, in my day job, I've been working as an environmental attorney. So I do climate, clean energy, and clean water work. So that's my background. But to me, this race is about being part of building a community that works better for everyone and provides opportunity to everyone. That's sort of the high level why in this race. And part of what I use to illustrate the why is I think about my own family's story in this community from an opportunity perspective. So I can trace my roots actually back to my great-great-grandfather, who came here as a German Jewish immigrant at a time when German Jewish immigrants didn't necessarily have opportunity everywhere. He faced discrimination, anti-Semitism. But in Des Moines, he had opportunity. He was able to open a small business, a small dry goods store, actually grow that business, and as it turned out, build a better life for himself, his family, and generations of his family. So when I talk about opportunity, that's what a great American city should provide. No matter who you are, how you got here, why you're here, how long you've been here, whether it's 5 months, 5 years, 5 generations, this community should work for you, should provide opportunity for you, should allow you to have a better life and a decent life, not just for yourself, but your family and the generations to come.
So you've been a city councilman for
6 years.
6 years. So what made you make the switch from? Because a lot of people will run city council their entire for.
Yeah.
What made you say I can be a mayor?
But you there's an opportunity to do more, and I think sometimes the current council, I think we as a council are maybe stuck in our ways on a lot of things, and there's an opportunity for us to think bigger, to be bigger, to do more, and it's the mayor's job to provide that vision, to provide that leadership, to get over some of those hurdles, and you see it on little issues and big issues. That I think we need more vision and to look at, putting aside the status quo and pushing for things to do things a little differently, do things better.
So you jump in anytime you want, but
yeah,
like
I was just gonna ask, like, what about that? Like, what different things?
Well, I'll give an example. This seems like a small thing, but then when I think about the price tag, it's actually a pretty big thing. One of the things I talk about, it's a difference. We kind of get mired in doing things the way we've always done things. And the example I like to give is the Walnut Street Bridge, which, if you've been around the last few years, we've reconstructed the Grand Avenue Bridge over the Des Moines River, the Locust Street Bridge over the Des Moines River, the Court Avenue Bridge over the Des Moines River, and then we also have the MLK Bridge over the Des Moines River. Well, next on our list, we've got reconstructing the Walnut Street Bridge. That's almost a $20 million project. And we could rehabilitate that bridge, make it pedestrian only for a fraction of the cost, save money, add a different type of amenity downtown. But there's massive resistance. And the arguments that I've gotten, well, we need it for redundancy, like, it could impact the cars. Well, then I asked, well, what kind of traffic flow do we have? Well, it turns out that those other 4 bridges that I talked about, if we just had those, they have the ability to serve 51,000 vehicle trips a day. Pre-pandemic, there were about 18,000 vehicle trips a day. So we have more than enough capacity. It's just we're stuck in the way of thinking about it. And we're using dollars, in my opinion, in ways that could be better used because we're just stuck in this old mindset.
So where would that money go for that bridge, for example, to be specific on that example that you're using? That $20 million you would spend only for a little bit for the pedestrian.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so that frees up a lot of thinking, right? Like, one of the things that's always hard is when you want to do something new or different, they say, well, where do you find the money to do that? And some of it, from a transportation perspective, I think we need to be focused on creating a more accessible community, a community that allows people who walk, who bike, who use transit to better access our community. And you can do a lot of small projects, whether it be filling sidewalk gaps so people can walk to school or a transit stop, whether it be a road redesign so that transit is better incorporated, whether it be maybe a road diet where you take a road that has too many lanes and that is unsafe for folks, and you reconfigure it and use it better so that you maximize the resource. All of those things, you could do multiple projects like that in multiple parts of our city for the dollars that you're going to save on a big project like the Walnut Street Bridge.
I'm glad that you brought that up, Josh, with transit. I wanted to ask you about DART, and in a bigger picture, like, obviously we're kind of a blue city in a red state, and that's one of those things that needs money from the state in order to be robust. So how, as mayor, do you see working with the legislature or doing what we can do to help Des Moines while still being mindful of the fact that we're in a red state and people have to kind of maybe adjust their expectations or go about it a certain way, right?
Yeah. So I've been on the DART Commission for the last 4 years. I actually was the alternate my first 2 years on the council, and I was one of the only alternates that showed up to the meetings, even if I wasn't actually representing the city there, just to learn the issues. And I've worked with the commission. One of the things that I think to your point, Chris, if we're going to have a robust transit system, the type of transit system that we need it to have funding beyond just the property tax from a local perspective, because Des Moines is at the 95-cent state cap from a property tax perspective. The suburbs have concerns that most of the services in Des Moines, and they feel it's inequitable for them to pay more. So we're trying to balance and keep the suburbs on board, because we need the suburbs. They help pay for the service, but also you need that connectivity if you want to connect people to jobs in the metro, if you want to connect them. So we need to try and keep that balance. One of the things that we've done in the last few years is we've taken a look at the funding formula for DART and changed that to help keep the suburbs on board and make it a little more equitable. But Des Moines had, for going along with that, we said, look, we recognize that we need to change the funding formula to keep folks on board, but I hope you'll recognize we need to diversify our funding. And so our ask to the DART Commission was that we lobby for new revenue from the state, and that be the priority, and that we be flexible on it. Well, we actually got an option. It's one of the few bright spots. I don't know that I could name another bright spot actually from the last legislative session, but the legislature has authorized Des Moines to use the franchise fee, up to 2.5 cents on the franchise fee, for transit funding. And that would allow us to help implement the funding formula, provide some relief to property taxpayers, and maybe even give us the flexibility to think about how we do some things differently or better from a service perspective. And so we got that passed. Now it only applies to Des Moines, which some of my colleagues on the council are a little upset about. But we have that option. Once we get to November, and for the next few months, there's going to be a big debate about whether or not Des Moines enacts that option. And if we don't, we're looking at some pretty severe service cuts, which is going in the opposite direction of what we need. We know for transit to work for folks, our system, we have sort of a bare bones system, and we have a hub and spoke system. We could use more crosstown routes. We could definitely use more frequency. One of the things that changes a transit system is when you get to a point where you can just walk outside when you're done with a meeting or done with a podcast, and you know that no matter where you're at, if a bus is going to come in 10 minutes, you're fine relying on that bus is a transportation option of choice, because you're not going to wait. It's not going to take all that coordination.
On lame terms, can you that 2 cent option or that option that you're mentioning? How does that translate in, like, how many more buses, or like how many more lines, or like what would that look like? Because that's one of the things that, I'm in the staffing industry. I talk about jobs and every single day, job seekers, and transportation is almost like 30% of job seekers can't get to work. So it's a big problem. So what would that look like? Sometimes I'll tell people, Des Moines is a great place, a great place to raise your kids, and compared to all the big cities, but the transportation is not. It's not. So how would that translate what you're saying into, like, how many buses or how many more stations, or what would that look like?
Well, so part of it we have to figure that out, but I think we don't know as much the proactive side. We know the service cuts that it would avoid, because we've started having that conversation. So one of the challenges with DART, right, there are a number of routes and these are good routes, that come every 20 minutes, right, which is decent frequency, but it's not great. And then we have routes that are 30 and 40 minutes. If we don't pass the franchise fee, most of our service is going to end up being every 40 minutes or every hour for a bus. And so what that does is you're still going to have access in a lot of the places, but your wait is going to be significantly longer if you have to transfer, because we have, like I said, that hub and spoke system. So sometimes, you're going across town and it might be 20 minutes from point A to point B, but you have to come downtown, wait to catch another bus, and go back out. And that's going to take a lot longer.
And who's in charge of passing that? The legislation, right?
So there are two pieces. The city of Des Moines, the city council, is responsible for the franchise fee. And then the DART commission is responsible for the DART service. And so without the franchise fee, the DART commission is faced with a budget and structural deficit. So their option is to
who's the party, or like who opposes this? So the commission is for it, the city is for it, wants it.
Well,
who's the one that votes against it?
So it's unclear how the Des Moines City Council is going to vote on this, and that's the first step. Is the Des Moines City Council has to be willing to pass the franchise fee, which will take some of the burden off the property tax base and secure the revenue. And it's unclear what the council is going to do. I know where I'm at because I know how important transit is to this community, how important it is to connecting people to jobs, to healthcare, to childcare. And if you don't have a strong transit system, this community can't work for everyone.
Right? Yeah, but that's one of the things so Chris and I sat down. We're like, what questions can we come up with? We're two concerned citizens. We vote. I'm gonna be a new voter. I just became a U.S. citizen.
Awesome.
So
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. So we were like, well, it's a blue city surrounded, in a red state. So it's what would you do exactly to go and get these things passed, knowing that it's a pretty it's red now. I mean, it's not purple. With the whole LGBTQ or anti-LGBTQ bills that it has been passed, like it's a big task. How would you do it, or who do you talk to, or like how would you go about it as a mayor?
Yeah, well, we need to use our voice more. One of the things, we're the biggest city in the state, and we have the opportunity to lead on issue after issue. And part of what we have to do, we have to look at the things that we can do at the local level, and there's almost always something that we can do on any issue. It might not be the biggest thing on the issue, but there's likely something that we can do. And then we have a voice. So we need to be creative and do the things we can from a policy perspective on every issue that we can. And then we need to use our voice and engage more. So one of the things, I'll give an example. And again, this is where I'm maybe in a different place than my colleagues. During the school voucher debate this last legislative session, I thought that we should have been opposed to the school voucher debate bill as a city. I was personally opposed. I posted messages on my social media. I said what I could in public forums that the voucher bill was hugely problematic, because so much of what we're trying to do as a city is create strong neighborhoods. And you can't have strong neighborhoods without strong neighborhood schools. And when you pass something that is going to gut funding for our neighborhood schools and only help a few, that's going to have a massive impact on the city. That's not just a school issue. And I care about it personally. My kids are 7 and 9. They're in the public schools right now. They're going to the same public schools I went to. And I got a great education in Des Moines public schools. I want them to get just as good an education, but not just them. I want everyone in our community to. And so sometimes we've got to advocate and use our voice and be a part of that debate up at the state level. But then there are other things we can do. So, for example, on the school side, we put dollars into creating 6 new preschool programs. We use some of our American Rescue Plan Act dollars, and we're creating full-day preschool classrooms at 6 elementary schools. Now, that's a development and education tool for those kids. I mean, early childhood education is one of the most important pieces for every kid to get access to. But it has a bigger impact, right? It strengthens that neighborhood school. It makes that neighborhood school more attractive. But for those families that now get preschool, And it's not just preschool, it's the wraparound care, so it's a full day. That's childcare for those families. I mean, it was when my kids got to the point where they were in school, rather than us having to figure out childcare, that's a big relief for working families. And we can do things like that strengthen our schools. Like, that's not our primary focus, but we can strengthen our schools that way. We should look at how we can do more preschool, because we have some local option sales tax dollars that are meant to strengthen neighborhoods. Well, I'd argue that adding preschool classrooms to neighborhood schools strengthens neighborhoods. Again, that goes back to one of your first questions about doing things a little differently. I mean, we've not thought about local option sales tax dollars that way, but there's nothing stopping us from thinking about it that way and doing things that way.
Yeah, I've got a question, kind of similar topic about what we can do, what you can do as mayor, but shifting the subject over to criminal justice reform. Looking at the city of Des Moines, we've got a situation where black people are 3 times more likely than white people to be arrested for the same crimes. We look around the country, we see a lot of cities, even in red states, that have found ways to decriminalize marijuana or make it a lowest enforcement priority. Yet here in Des Moines, we haven't seen any progress on that. How would you approach marijuana? How would you approach issues of criminal justice reform? And kind of what would your assessment be of how Des Moines is doing on that stuff?
We could be doing a lot better. So I've been outspoken. One of the things that we did do that I thought was positive, in 2020 we had a marijuana task force, and we asked that group to look at the things that we could do as a city, and that included some high-level things. The advocacy approach, where we take a position on state-level bills to legalize, to decriminalize. And I will tell you, the best option would be for the state to legalize marijuana, treat it like alcohol, regulate it, tax it. That makes it, that's the easiest way and the cleanest way to address marijuana. But in the task force recommendation was to make marijuana the lowest enforcement priority for the city of Des Moines. And I have vocally supported that. I am completely on board. I think we need to do that. The question right now is, how do you get 4 votes to do something like that? Because that's ultimately what it takes at the city council level to make that change. And that's where we haven't had the 4 votes.
How many votes is there?
There's
4 and
there's 7 of us. So
right, but who votes? Oh, not who, but like who has opposed it and who has, or it hasn't gotten to the vote yet.
well, so a lot of times the way, for better or for worse, the way the council functions is there are things that don't even get to the agenda if it's not going to pass. So a lot of the votes you'll see are consensus votes, or it's 5-2 votes or 6-1 votes, because things don't get on the agenda if folks don't know it's going to pass. And so this is one of the things that we had some discussion about it, but it's never had the votes. It's never been voted on. That's part of why I try, and when I come on podcasts like this, I try and be absolutely clear. I support X. So if you're part of the public and you're trying to count your votes and figure out, okay, why has this not been voted on? Well, I support it, so I'm not the one that's holding that up. But there are other council members who I don't think support it. I think there was maybe some momentum for it, and then I think the police chief made some comments about how he wouldn't enforce or would have to enforce state law. But you're not saying that you don't enforce state law. You make it the lowest enforcement priority. So you're not, I did a ride along, and if you ever do a ride along, every single call that comes in gets a priority. And pretty much the police are focused on those high priority calls. When I did my ride along, we went and investigated a complaint in an apartment building of the smell of marijuana. And it's those type of things that would become a lower enforcement priority. And it's the type of thing where, maybe if you don't see it, like if you don't have concrete evidence that it is there, you're not searching someone's car.
Yeah, smelling it, like,
right.
So what?
Right. Smelling it is not
right.
Is not evidence of possession, like
Uh-huh.
someone could have used it somewhere, like so you stop searches based on that. That has a big impact in the way we do policing.
Yeah, it's such a criminal justice is such a like a chain reaction to things, you know. So that's why a lot of children are being raised by single parent, because some parents are, or some people are there for like marijuana possession, which is, you know, it's gonna be legal at some point, and so you're in jail for like a nonviolent crime, and your child is, you know, which affects that single mother more than likely to have a job on her own, and you know, needing childcare. So it's like a huge chain reaction. It sounds small, but it's so big. But I wanted to ask you about the, you know, educate me a little bit. So when the president comes, when the president gets elected, they bring their cabinet, right? They bring their team. Who are you able to hire and not hire? How does that work for the mayor? Like, is the police chief somebody that you can hire or fire? Is the city manager, like, how would it look like if you get elected? Like, what can you do to make it like really impactful and be like, I got my team now? Because, you know, some people are hired from a previous mayor, right? So like, what would it look like? What would that look like?
So we have a weak mayor system here in Des Moines.
Mm-hmm.
So what that means is we have a weak mayor city manager form of government.
Mm-hmm.
So that means the council and mayor collectively hire and fire 3 people primarily: the city manager, the city attorney, and the city clerk. The city manager is the one who hires and fires the department directors. So, you know, if we're unhappy with the direction, we provide that feedback to the city manager. We can hire or fire the city manager. The question is, does any one decision of the city manager rise to the level of making a change like that? And that's part of the challenge. And then the other part of the challenge is, if the council disagrees, the council and mayor disagree, like if there's a split, some people agree with the decision, some people disagree with the decision, how do you incorporate that into your evaluation? So it's a balance. So the mayor doesn't have a lot of hiring and firing power here in Des Moines. What the mayor has is appointment power. The mayor appoints the other council members to the boards and commissions around the metro, which has a much bigger impact than people realize. You know, there's a big difference in terms of how I would approach things on DART versus how some of my colleagues would approach things on DART. That makes a big difference. Who's appointed to be our rep on DART matters a lot. Mm-hmm. Similarly with the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and the Metro Waste Authority. So those appointments matter. Appointments to the Des Moines Water Works Board, the Airport Authority, the Planning and Zoning Commission. The mayor has a bit more appointment authority than others on the council do. And then the other piece, the mayor has much more of a bully pulpit. The mayor has the ability to get attention, to set the agenda, to talk about issues. I think it's a lot easier to, even in the absence of a vote, to make sure, for example, on making marijuana the lowest enforcement priority. If the mayor is out there talking about it, my hope is that other members of the council will get questions from their constituents and even the media, so that folks know, okay, this is where the holdup is. This is who is for this idea, who's against the idea. The mayor can help set that agenda and drive that agenda in ways that I think are really important.
And maybe you could transition to another one of the questions, but we were talking about voter turnout and how it's there's a big the numbers are kind of scary when you look at how many people actually vote for city council and mayor, especially on non presidential years, right? What do you call that? The non
midterm or something?
Yeah, the midterm stuff. Yeah. So
I call it an off year, because the midterm is the midterm was like what we just had in 2022. And we're in 2023. So we're not even on the same ballot as governor or Congress. Like, the only thing that's on the ballot is city and school board.
So we looked into the numbers, and so correct us if we're wrong on any of these, but in 2021, when you last ran for council, you won with 66% of the vote, but that was only 5,258 votes in your ward. Across the whole city, only 31,138 people voted out of 145,613 voting age residents. So with voter turnout like that, we're looking at like about 21%. And if we take out like people with felonies, right, or people that are not citizens and can't vote, even then, even if we take them out, there's still a lot of people that are just choosing not to vote or like not engaged. So what do you make of that? Like, what does that say about our system or about the residents of Des Moines and a lot of them just being disengaged from the process or feeling like it doesn't work for them or it's not serving them or there's no point even paying attention enough to spend 20 minutes voting every 2 years? It seems like such a small thing to do. But I've always believed that not voting is also a choice. And so what do you make of those numbers?
Yeah, well, I think, I think part of it is the way we engage folks and the fact that we engage the folks that it's easy to engage, the people who are already engaged, the people who are at neighborhood association meetings, and those things are important, right? It's important to talk with folks, but we don't reach a lot of the other folks, and it's hard. I've been out knocking doors most evenings and weekends, and I start with a list, so I start with people who I think are more likely to vote than not. But if I come across them, I'll talk to anyone who I come across when I'm out there, and there are people in our community that, I mean, I can knock doors in my ward, and they're people who I've represented on the council for 6 years, and they have no idea that I'm their city council member. And some of that's on me, right? It's how we communicate and how we get in front of folks. But some of it's their life circumstances, right? They're focused on, if they have 1 or 2 jobs and young kids, and they're just busy, and they don't necessarily think about it that often. And so we've got to figure out more ways to engage more people so they know what city government does, what city government can do, and the important role it has in impacting people's lives and hopefully making people's lives better. The people who are most engaged get that, right? And they also, when you're more engaged, you get a city government that maybe reflects the things that you want it to do. And that's not necessarily the same things as the folks who are less likely to engage in that conversation.
I think some of the things that you mentioned, like the child care and the wraparound education day and transportation and marijuana, these are or the LGBTQ, those are issues that affect people with lower incomes, people of color, marginalized communities, but those communities don't, at least in my opinion, they don't seem to be catered to. It's something that is campaigned on, but it doesn't seem to be like, we want to pass this, or this is what I'm campaigning on, but I'm not gonna go and talk to you at your neighborhood or in your block, and when that happens, and they come out, then the person gets voted in, and then that's it, and then just kind of everything kind of stays like that, and everything's the same. I believe that's some of the disillusionment, or the disengagement of well, I'm gonna go and support the candidate, and then when that happens, then nothing changes. So why did I even go? Why does it? Well, what would you say to somebody that is intentionally not doing it? So they're choosing not to because they feel disillusioned.
Yeah. Well, and for better or for worse, I think we set up government systems that change slowly. And so it's sometimes hard for folks to see the difference. But, I see the difference being engaged in doing the things I do. One example that I talk about, and I think I was having a particularly tough day, but I was driving to get my groceries. And we had a big fight. This was maybe 4.5 years ago, at the beginning part of the Fluor Drive reconstruction project. we had a fight over whether or not to. It was in line with our policy. We had a complete streets policy to have sidewalks on both sides, and we nearly didn't have sidewalks on both sides. But I had to push really hard to make sure that we had sidewalks on both sides. And I was driving to the Hy-Vee on Fleur Drive, and they're low-income or affordable apartments, sort of on Fleur Drive, kind of near Bell, between Bell and Willamere.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm driving out there, I see this family. It's a mom and dad and their son, and they're walking on the sidewalk because the sidewalk's done now. They're walking on the sidewalk south, and half hour, 45 minutes later, as I'm driving home, I see that same family walking now north on the sidewalk, carrying grocery bags. All three of them were carrying grocery bags. But that sidewalk made this community work a little bit better for that family, right? They can actually walk safely to their grocery store. Mm-hmm. And they might not have a car, but they can get their groceries a little bit easier because we invested in that sidewalk. That's a really small thing, right? Although it might not be such a small thing in their life. And there are all sorts of examples where if we do it right and we reshift our priorities, I don't see every day the priority one sidewalks that we've started funding. And that was something we weren't doing before I was on the council. But we've identified what we call priority one sidewalks, which are the places in our community where there is no sidewalk to a school or to a transit stop. And there are almost 170 miles of priority one sidewalks. There are over 600 miles of sidewalk gap in our community. Mm. We're going too slowly there, but we're now doing that, right? Those sidewalk gaps have existed for decades where we make it harder for people to walk to school or walk to a bus route. Every sidewalk gap that we fill in is making someone's life a little bit better. And if you have a different council and a council that acts a little quicker, we'll make more people's lives better quicker. We got to do those things, and then we have to tell the story. And we have to highlight how we've made life better for those families. There's a lot more that we have to do, and we go a lot slower than I would like. We're making changes. You talked about criminal justice reform. For the first time ever, we put our policies and procedures online for our police department. That's a small thing, right? That's transparency. But, there's a saying, sunshine is the best disinfectant. Well, when you put our policies and procedures online, you'll all of a sudden start seeing, well, these are where our policies and procedures aren't in line with best practices. And so you start changing some of those things. You start doing things like we did a study on our data collection practices. And for the first time ever, we're now collecting data on all stops. So a stop that doesn't lead to a ticket or citation, that helps us know a little bit more about what we're doing, whether or not there's a disparate impact. Mm-hmm. We're building some of those foundational things for bigger change. It goes slowly, and it can be frustrating for folks, but those of us who are working to change things and to improve things, it's up to us to tell that story, to engage with as many people as possible so that they know we're working to make things better.
That's a great point. I want to ask a question about population growth or lack thereof in Iowa and in Des Moines. Here at Infinite Resources, we see obviously the job market up close, right? We see job seekers looking for work. We see companies looking for talent. I see that at Project Iowa too, with folks looking for work. And I think we all know there's a talent gap. We don't have enough. We don't have enough people moving here. We don't have enough growth. And everyone keeps banging their head against the wall trying to figure that out. But when you think about making Des Moines a place where people not just want to go to, but remain in, what do you see, Josh, for the future? And as mayor, like, what can you do to kind of boost us in that area?
Yeah, so I think there are two pieces to that. I typically start on the opportunity side and go to the welcoming side, but this was more a retention and choose to be here. We need to create a welcoming community, an inclusive community, a community where everyone is accepted for who they are. And so some of those things that we've talked about, whether it be the attacks on the LGBTQ community, the attacks on reproductive freedom in this state, when those things happen, there are folks who, one, question whether or not they belong in the state, they're welcome in this state, and we need to send a different message to everyone. We need to send a message to everyone. And I should say, when there are attacks on the immigrant community and our refugee communities, it's the same thing. We need to send a message to everyone that they belong in this community, that our community is stronger when they're here and when they're part of it. And that's a part of convincing people to come here and to stay here. But we also need to make sure that this community works for folks. And that's some of the other pieces of the conversation we've been having. Strong transit systems so people can actually be connected to jobs and services and amenities. We need to really address housing as a community, because if you can't find housing that meets your needs at a price you can afford, fundamentally this community doesn't work for you. And we have not been building enough housing. We need to build more housing of all types and at all price points, because if we don't, we're going to price more and more people out of this community, and that's another piece of what we can do to attract and retain people. We need to make things work for them here, and if we don't have housing that works for them, that's sort of the baseline for so many people.
You mentioned immigrants and refugees, and would you support undocumented people to have to get a driver's license or an ID?
Yes, I think that makes sense, right? I think you want to integrate folks who are in our community. You want to help them integrate into the community as best we can.
And the reason why I ask is a lot of people think that they think what they think, but the narrative is that they steal jobs and that they don't pay taxes and that they're using the social services that are, which is not true. All of it is not true. They do pay payroll taxes, sales taxes. We always talk about how undocumented people are the ones that get abstracted the most. So the bank industry benefits from them. You can open a bank account with an ITIN number. You can start your own business with an ITIN number, which you will eventually pay income taxes on. The insurance companies, you can get insurance and car insurance. The hospitality industry, all the industries abstract things from the undocumented community, and payroll taxes, state taxes. People pay that. So why not give them a something that they can drive safely and which
right.
Impact.
It facilitates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So where does this would be a chance for you to trash your opponents? Where do they stand? Why should they go? We talked about all this marijuana and decriminalization and housing and school and all this stuff. What separates you from Connie and Connie Bozeman and Denver? What separates you from them?
Yeah. So some of it is the policy background that I have, and that's part of where we started. I mean, I have a range of policy experiences, but most importantly, I've been an environmental attorney in Iowa for the last 11 years. It's not always easy to be an environmental attorney in this state. You bump up against some of the biggest special interests that exist in this state. And I've been willing to stand up to special interests, and I think that's a differentiator. But I've been able to do it in creative ways, in ways that advance policy. So it's that combination. It's not just a willingness to stand up, but it's a willingness to stand up and to push policy. And I've done that on a variety of issues, right? I've been a leading voice when we talk about making marijuana the lowest enforcement priority. I've been the one on the council pushing to make policy changes like that. I've pushed on a variety of things to lead on how we improve our police and public safety service, thinking about how we do things differently, how we add accountability. I've been more specific. For example, I support a civilian review board that can be as strong as possible under existing state law. And I've worked with the community on a specific proposal that accomplishes that. I've stood up on issues, whether it be, I had a proposal on reproductive freedom when the state, when the state's looking to take away access and ban reproductive freedom and care. I identified things that we could do at the city level, things that other cities around the country have already done, and I proposed that and led on that. And there are issue after issue where I'm going to engage and find the things we can do at the local level and push to get it done.
What is the biggest issue? What is the top 5 things that you're like, this has to change? Number 1, what can you give us your priority list?
Yeah, so I think housing is probably the biggest challenge that we have as a community. You talk about growth and Des Moines' growth. Des Moines in 1960 had 208,000 people. It wasn't until 2020, in the 2020 census, that we exceeded that at 214,000.
Wow.
The metro's grown around us quite a bit. I mean, if you look, since 2009, the metro's added 140,000 people. Des Moines was part of that, obviously, but it took Des Moines 60 years to add 6,000 people, and this metro added 140 in 13 years. And then we're anticipated to grow another 250,000 people. If we do not build housing and build a significant amount of it, what we are going to be doing as a community is pricing more and more people out of the community, making our community less affordable, and it's going to work less well for folks. We're at the point where now is the time to address that, not 20 years from now when we have another 250,000 people living here. So I think a priority of mine is to make sure we do more from housing and to build more housing of all types and at all price points. Another piece of that, I want to think about how we build our future workforce. So one of the things that we could do a better job of is connecting folks to things like apprenticeship programs and pathways in the skilled trades. When we provide incentives for new buildings, I don't want to just build a new building. I want to build up the people who are building that building. And that's connecting them to apprenticeship programs so that they have the skills to work on that next building and the building after that, not just one building. It's thinking about how we make an accessible community, and we've talked about some of these things from a transportation perspective, but we need a better transit system than we have, and we need to diversify funding for transit. That needs to be a priority, or things like that don't happen. We don't create an accessible community. And then as we build our transportation infrastructure, we need to think about how we make our community more walkable, more bikeable, and incorporate all modes of transportation into our infrastructure investments. Those are some of the things that I think are immediate and doable and impactful.
When you're mayor, there's a lot of pressures facing you, and time. It's always a time crunch, and you have to make decisions about do we focus on this or that, or how much time do we have to devote. So I'm sure there's a lot of importance on working smart, not hard, and not reinventing the wheel. So I'm wondering, is there a city or certain cities that you look to that are a great model that Des Moines could follow on certain things?
Yeah, I think it's going to vary from issue to issue. I don't know that any one city has everything right. Mm-hmm. But if you look at some of the things, I think the Twin Cities are interesting to look at from a housing perspective, and some of the changes they've made to allow more types of housing to be built in the community. We need to think about changes like that. I think there are other communities that have already started incorporating apprenticeship programs into their economic development model. And I could list a whole bunch that have at least pieces of it, or things that we can look at, from Omaha to Kansas City. There are a lot of places. And then part of it is you need to engage with more cities and more communities. A good friend of mine has been on the Nashville City Council and was just elected mayor of Nashville. He represented a district that was pretty similar to mine, that had some old neighborhoods, some of the downtown, and now he's mayor of Nashville. And he's someone who, when he was on the city council, we'd talk regularly just to exchange ideas, because they're dealing with some of the same things that we're dealing with, but they're also dealing with different things. And you got to be engaged with a wide variety of folks and look at a wide variety of cities to pull in solutions. Mm. Another example, I had a chance the Center on Policing Equity invited me to be a part of a cohort of elected officials just thinking about policing issues. And it was a series of webinars where you had folks talking on topics from data to school resource in how folks were doing things in the schools to, automated traffic enforcement or changing the way we do traffic enforcement. And I was on calls with folks from, New York and LA, and also had smaller communities. Like it was folks from all over who had very different perspectives and very different access to resources or issues that they're dealing with, but just sharing of ideas, because you need to hear from folks and need to hear what's possible.
You mentioned that that Des Moines has a weak city mayor system. Am I saying it right?
Yeah.
And that the strongest thing that the mayor has is like the pulpit and the voice and the. Can you make a commitment or a promise to people, I guess, or to whoever you want them to vote, that like you will stick and tell the stories that and push the issues that you're saying that you're supporting? That's part of, I think that's part of the disillusionment with some non-voters, is that it's through the campaigns that happen and but up until that, once that happens, because I've never heard of the mayor speak anything like I don't even know his full name. So like that's how much I don't know him. Like he's not around. Like So what can you tell the voters that they can continue to see consistently out of you? Is this because that's the strongest, right? Your voice and
and I want to engage in this job differently. I mean, I think there are a lot of good things that the current mayor's done, but I think there's some gaps too. And I think one of the gaps is engagement at the local level. One of the things, for example, I don't know if this is exactly what you're talking about, but I think we should do more budget workshops that are accessible to the public. And we should be doing that in our public libraries and trying to engage and get our city budget in front of more folks. I'm happy to, if you want me on this podcast, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected mayor, I'm happy to come on this podcast regularly and talk about issues. I mean, we could even pick a topic and dive into a topic in a lot more detail rather than cover a lot of different topics. I'm happy to engage in ways like this. I mean, I think this is a great way to reach folks. I've been doing things, this campaign, I've been going to church more. I don't go to church. I've been going to other people's churches to just try and talk and introduce myself and engage with folks who maybe haven't seen anyone before. And oftentimes on campaigns, people go to church like the last weekend or two before as a campaign event. And I've been going all summer to different churches. And I know there's more, this community is big and there are a lot of folks who I still haven't reached, but I view the job, that's part of the job, is to engage. And some of it is I rely on folks in the community to help introduce me and to tell me, okay, you need to come here. And I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to put in the time. I'm willing to engage in as many ways as I possibly can.
The Mexican president does every single day a morning. They call it the morning one. Every morning he sends and does a press conference. And who was it? What U.S. president did it?
FDR.
On the radio. FDR, right? Yeah. He did it on the radio. So yeah, the table, you have an open invitation if you do become elected. Maybe do a daily podcast.
I don't know that I'm going to commit to a daily podcast, but I'm happy to be a regular guest, and I'm happy to try and figure out ways that I can engage more.
Yeah. Are we missing any other questions? I was hoping that we didn't.
Not really.
We covered everything, but
really good. I think just any final thoughts for folks that maybe they're not sure who to vote for yet, or they're not sure if they're going to vote. I mean, what would you kind of leave them with?
Yeah. Well, I mean, really, what this race is about, it's about our future, right? It's about our collective future. It's about the future we build together, and I think about that a lot. Right? My kids are 7 and 9. and I think about when they're going to be 17 and 19. What kind of community will we have created? And that's not just up to me. That's up to the folks who vote in this election, who engage in our community. And I want to make sure that we're creating a community that works for everyone and provides that opportunity to everyone. Like I said, I think about it, most days, they're in conferences today, so I didn't start my day today this way. But most days I start my day dropping my kids off at their elementary school. And you see the full range of folks in our community. They're kids who walk to school, who are getting dropped off. I mean, I've been there on days when it's been rainy, and you see kids walking to school without a raincoat or an umbrella. You see the full range of challenges that kids in our community face. And I want to make sure that this is a community that provides every single one of those kids and every single one of those families with opportunity. There's so much that goes into that. But if that's not your guiding star, right? If that's not what you're trying to accomplish, I think you're gonna miss things. And that's what I want to do. Is I want to create that type of community, that type of future, and I want to do it with everyone who's willing to join me and be a part of that.
All right. Well, with that, we'll leave it at that. Thank you again,
Thanks, Josh.
Josh.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Making time for us, and hopefully, we'll talk to you when you're mayor, Josh Mandelbaum.
Yeah. Well, I'm either going to be mayor or still a council member, and I'm willing to come back either way.
All right. Thank you very much.
Best of
Thank you,
luck.
Chris. Thank you.
Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by Infinite Resources, a local staffing agency connecting diverse job candidates and central Iowa companies.
Amplified.